This is the City of God podcast, where Christ meets culture. And welcome to the City of God podcast, where we are weekly talking about today's biggest cultural issues, all through the lens of God's infallible word. My name is Rob Pacienza, and I am joined by my co-host, John Rabe. John, great to see you today.
Great to see you as well, Rob. Always a pleasure to get to be part of the program. And today we get to be joined by somebody who's a very good and longtime friend of our ministry, who has a lot of insight into what's happening in the legal world when it comes to Christians and things that Christians are concerned about.
Absolutely. Our guest today is Brad Dacus. He's the president of the Pacific Justice Institute, which is a legal defense organization that specializes in the defense of religious freedom, parental rights, and other civil liberties. As you said, a great friend of the ministry. And Brad, I want to welcome you to the City of God.
Oh, it's great to be on the program, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Brad, let's dive right into some of the issues that you're battling and you're helping to protect for individuals all across North America who love religious liberty and understand the Judeo-Christian roots and heritage of our nation. And one of those issues you've been fighting for is the issue of parental rights. How important is this issue today in the 21st century, and what are the specific issues you see that are threatening parental rights in America right now?
Well, it's a very important issue, and we saw that in the last governor's race in Virginia, where you had an upset where the candidate running for governor made parental rights the issue, and you had people from both parties coalescing around him, supporting him, and he was elected governor on that issue. I believe it's going to be a major issue in this election. Moms and dads, no matter what their political party, they want their rights respected when it comes to the raising up of their children. And yet it's being attacked on so many different platforms and so many different ways from the internet, but also in our public schools on a massive level. And then programs, social programs and child protective services coming in and taking children from families simply because of their Judeo-Christian worldview and how they raise their children. We've never seen anything like this. It's on not just on a local level, it's also on a federal level. And that's what makes this so challenging, because we have to challenge it not only dealing with individual school boards sometimes, but also on a federal level, dealing with mandates from the President Biden.
Now, this is really important, Brad, and I know the way that this goes when we do this on a program. There are people who will say, "Oh, come on, you guys are getting carried away. You're overstating things. You make it sound like it's worse than it is." What are the attacks that we're seeing on parental rights, particularly, say, when it comes to schools and so forth? What are some of the things that we're seeing that show us that this isn't just strong language that you're using, that there really is a major threat that's taking place in separating children from their parents, and oftentimes on religious or Christian boundaries?
Yeah, the state of California is a classic example of what we now see happening nationwide. The state actually mandates all the way down to the kindergarten level that children be familiarized and be inoculated, if you will, to look at LGBTQ, transgender relationships in a positive light. This indoctrination is widespread. It's according to the law, and it's implemented at every single grade level, K through 12, in California public schools. There's a reason that over 50,000 children were pulled last year alone from the Los Angeles Unified School District. Over 50,000. And the primary reason is because parents are saying, enough is enough. I don't want my children indoctrinated with this poisonous attitudes and beliefs of pro-confusion and pro-sex and sexuality and sexual lifestyles that go completely against not only what I believe is best for me as a parent, but also what social studies also affirm is very clearly supporting the issues and the opinions of parents.
Brad, we're finally seeing a lot of parents wake up. They're attending now school board meetings across the nation, making their voice heard, objecting to the government mandated curriculum that you've just mentioned. But talk to us about the state of the legislation in California that's actually attempting to bar adults and parents from attending these school board meetings and doing it in the name of harassment. Tell us a little bit about that legislation.
Yeah, we at Pacific Justice Institute are taking on a number of cases, including, for example, one in the state of Texas where someone attends a school board meeting, a parent, they're angry, they're upset. They express their anger and they give it factual support as to why they're upset, and they're hauled off as being a domestic terrorist. We see this, this mandate coming from this administration's FBI and the Department of Justice. It's extremely alarming. Well, here we have this pending bill in California where if it's passed, it'll intimidate every parent who ever attends a school board meeting to not say anything too negative for fear that it could be deemed harassment by a school board member. And they could face very serious consequences. So it's intimidation. I believe it's unconstitutional. If it passes, they're begging for a challenge for a case that could go to the Supreme Court. But this is just an example. We expect to see this in other states as well. New Jersey, we're having to sue right now the Attorney General of New Jersey. Why? Because he's mandating every public school teacher to lie to parents if they see a child that has gender confusion. They're supposed to lie to parents and use pronouns that violate the conscience of the teacher. So this is coast to coast, and that's why we have to take it very seriously. That's another reason why more and more parents see public schools and they're like not as educational institutions, but indoctrinational spiritual death camps.
And that's something that Rob and I have talked about quite a bit on this podcast and in our other programming at Coral Ridge Ministries. And because we're extremely concerned about the way that schools are being used to indoctrinate children and about the way that the gender ideology particularly seems to be providing that wedge between parents and children. And we've talked quite a bit as well about how parents need to seriously consider their children's education and where they're sending them. But this gender ideology really does seem to be one of the key wedge issues, doesn't it? That seems to be where so much of the damage is being done. And maybe it's a small percentage of the children, but it's a really enormously growing percentage of the children. And I think the schools have more than a little to do with that.
Oh, the schools are actively engaged in encouraging gender confusion. It's not unusual for a child, especially in early adolescence and junior high, to have a lot of questions as to their masculinity or femininity, and maybe it's a tomboy, maybe it's a boy that never played football. Whatever the case, they're taking children who are very vulnerable and using it in a way that is encouraging and fanning the flames of gender confusion. It's not isolated. It's actually very, very widespread now across the country, and it's something that has very high stakes. It's not just a fad either. We're talking about permanent sterilization after 6 months of hormonal infusion of the opposite sex hormones. Permanent sterilization. And a study just came out that shows that kids that are encouraged and, quote, affirmed into this confusion, they have a suicide rate 12 times, more than 12 times greater than the average adolescent, than the average child at the same age. This is catastrophic, and it must be addressed as what it is, which is harmful and dangerous, in addition to undermining of the fundamental rights of parents over their children.
Absolutely. I mean, it's, to us that believe in natural law, God's natural law and God's design for humanity, it only makes sense when you go against God's design for gender and sexuality. We can expect nothing but chaos. God designed it so that we might flourish and have shalom, and we're certainly seeing chaos and confusion all over the place. And as you mentioned, just the record numbers of depression, suicide rates skyrocketing. You just just wonder how far do we have to go as a nation and society before people start to wake up to see the widespread ramifications. Well, another issue, in addition to gender confusion and parental rights, is parental rights and abortion. And we can see this happening in Nevada right now. Planned Parenthood describes abortion for young girls in Nevada as follows, quote, "No parental involvement required, unquote." So explain a little bit about what's happening in Nevada and why this is such an important parental right issue as well.
Yeah, we have an office in Nevada, and it's headed up by one of our star attorneys, Emily Mimnaugh. She's fantastic. She's been working with the legislature as called upon to testify and support legislative actions that will firm up the rights of parents, particularly when it comes to notice and parents being aware of what's happening to their children. This is very basic, and yet Planned Parenthood, make no mistake, their goal is simple. They want to cut parents completely out of the process. They want to promote abortions. They don't care how it victimizes young girls. They don't care, obviously, about the painful, horrific death that preborn babies suffer at any stage of development, including 9 months. They're against giving even morphine to a preborn baby, even in the later stages of development. It's a very sick, evil organization, and violates the fundamentals of any understanding of human rights and human dignity, much less parents' rights. So that's the Planned Parenthood. That's what they're pushing. And we at PJI, we're standing up for parents in Nevada, and we're working very hard to make sure that their rights will be respected. We hope that this upcoming election will provide the legislative power needed to make sure that the right laws are passed and respectful of parental rights as well as the preborn.
All right, so I have a question for each of you as we talk about these parental rights issues. First, you, Rob, as a pastor and as a theologian, I think there's sort of a gut recognition that parents have rights over their kids, but somebody who's listening saying, oh, this is some sort of covert, whatever ism they want to claim that we're representing. This is not Christian. It's just some kind of conservative, some kind of conservative cause. What is the case for parental rights? Why is that something that we as parents should be concerned about? And then, Brad, I want to find out the legal side of it from you.
Yeah, I think from a theological and biblical perspective, the very first pages of Scripture describe the family as the foundational sphere of a flourishing society. Before there was the state, before there was even the church, there was the family with one man and one woman living together in marriage, in the covenant of marriage, that they would be called to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. This was God's design for human flourishing. It was God's design for how his glory would be extended to the nations. And so I think when we attack the family and we attack parental rights, we're going against God's design for shalom. We're going against God's design for how he intended humanity to flourish and to fulfill their purpose of why they were created in his image in the first place. I think then when you get to Deuteronomy 6, what does he say? It's the family, not the state, not the government mandating what is right and what is wrong, but it's the parents walking along the street from the time you rise, from the time you go to bed, you walk at the city gate, you walk along the street, you're teaching them the truths of God's holy word. This was always the responsibility of the parents, of the covenant family, and we're seeing an all-out attack and assault. But we shouldn't be surprised because this battle is not against flesh and blood. Any anti-God, anti-Christian agenda or propaganda or movement throughout history has always tried to attack the family unit and the nuclear family, and we're seeing that once again today.
Yeah, and Karl Marx specifically so. One of the tenets was you have to break up the family. You have to re-engineer the family, and so it's not a surprise.
And then Lenin followed after him and said, give me the children children and we'll go change the world.
Yeah.
And so
every dictator is recognized, get a hold of the kids and separate them from
attack the
parents.
nuclear family, we can turn the world upside down.
So Brad, from your standpoint as an attorney who deals with these issues, a lot of people who are in their 30s or 40s have just grown up with the idea, the Hillary Rodham Clinton idea. Well, it takes a nation, or it takes a village to raise a child. These ideas might sound foreign to them, but really the presumption for most of our legal history is that parents have these rights. Has that not been the case?
Oh, you're absolutely correct. And you go back 100 years and there's solid case law. Pierce versus Society of Sisters, Myers, Nebraska, Wisconsin v. Yoder, just to name a few of longstanding cases where they recognize that parents have a fundamental right, which is the highest right you can have respected under the Constitution, a fundamental God-given right over the education, upbringing of their children, religious, moral instruction, health, medical welfare of their children. This is a fundamental right of parents, and it's respected by the Constitution. The Constitution as an application to parents' rights and the parents' rights issues in case law. Some people say, well, why didn't they just write it in as another amendment to the Constitution and say parents have a fundamental right over their children? Well, it's sort of like writing in an amendment saying, you have a right to breathe. You have a right to sleep at night. You have a right to eat breakfast and dinner. They said, it's ridiculous. These are things that are just given. Everyone just knows these. We could be here all day. So they recognized in the Constitution that there are other basic fundamental rights that we just assume for the day, and that is parents' rights clearly is one of them, as has been affirmed by the Supreme Court in multiple decisions in case law.
Brad, when it comes to parental rights, I think a lot of our parents out there, maybe parents that are listening, live in fear, living fear of cancel culture, being shamed, being labeled by our government and the mainstream media as domestic terrorist. So in light of those fears and those scare tactics, what is your advice to parents who love freedom, who understand their God-given rights as a mom and as a dad? What is your advice in the midst of an age, in the midst of the spirit of this age that is doing everything possible to erase those rights?
Well, first, parents need to know how to protect themselves from immediate threats. So, for example, social workers are taking children all over the country, including cities that are blue cities, if you will, in red states. We see this happening, where social workers are coming in and saying, oh, you parents are Christians? Oh, you're not going to encourage your child's gender confusion at the age of 13? Okay, we're going to take the child from you and we're going to start the process. We're going to start the transition, so to speak. That is not hypothetical. We have multiple cases we've handled and are dealing with right now as we speak. Parents need to be equipped. So on our website, we have a free resource. Every family in America should have it. It's free. It's called 12 Steps to Protect Your Children from CPS or social workers. 12 Steps to Protect Your Children. And they can download that for free on our website at pji.org. That's P for Pacific, J for Justice, I for Institute.org. That's number one. Number two, parents need to re-examine having their children in any government or public school. And they need to look at other educational alternatives. And in addition to that, we're helping churches begin what's called church homeschool co-ops. We have examples for it. We've helped many, many churches across the country already step in to do that. They don't have to begin a private school. They can just have a church homeschool co-op. They're easy, they're effective, and they're legal. We can help them along those lines very, very easily. And then I think they also need to do something really basic, and that's vote. Parents need to go and vote. They need to vote for candidates at the school board level as well as at the national level that respect parental rights and hold them dearly. And then finally, I'm going to say parents need to bunker down with regards to the input of their children regarding their laptops and their cell phones. I strongly encourage families, and a lot of homeschooling families have been broadsided by this, thinking they're doing everything right, and suddenly their kids get confused and messed up. It's often because there's no filtering on the laptops. And even if there is filtering, there's still thoughts and ideas that come in, infecting the minds of their children. So I encourage that they have children on laptops, they need to have filtering. Also, the children need to look at their laptop, not in their bedroom, but in the kitchen, on the kitchen countertop, with no headphones, with the parents listening to everything. This is very important. As far as cell phones, I encourage you to get a flip phone has text messaging and phone, and even then have mirrored software that allows the parents to watch and mirror every single text message and everything that flip phone is used for, or if they have a cell phone in the same way. But these are basic things that are really passed over in many discussions, but are having a huge impact on children that are otherwise presumably protected.
That's excellent advice and really good practical wisdom for how to handle some of these things. Brad, as we talk about these issues, one of the things that seems to tie it all together to me is this increasing weaponization of government and government agencies against people of faith or against ideological opponents. That's even been part of the discussion regarding former President Trump and his trials, but even leaving aside that whole ball of wax, which tends to sort of twist the discussion in other directions, are you concerned about this increasing use of government to go after people who are not ideologically liberal, who are not ideologically left, and to tag them as terrorists and deviants of some sort?
Oh, absolutely. I never thought in my 30 years of practice I would ever live to see the day where I looked at district attorneys as tyrannical political enemies of freedom and liberty. But that's what we have, not just in the Trump case. That's what we have involving other people running for office in Georgia, Arizona, local level politicians in California, school board members, where after they decide they're going to run, then suddenly they're broadsided and attacked by the local DA, who's of a different political party, who's from the left specifically. These are unprecedented lawfare tactics that I never thought I would see, not in the United States, maybe in Castro's Cuba, maybe in Venezuela or some other tyrannical place, but not in the United States. Yet it's happening. And it's very dangerous because if it's allowed to continue and we don't make major reform, then we're going to see many people not run for office at all for fear that they could be targeted and prosecuted with some bogus allegation related maybe to taxes or something else. So it's going to be very intimidating for us to have a free society of a nation where we're electing people, because many people are going to be intimidated to even run, much less have businesses in those states like New York and California that pride itself in such tyrannical acts against individuals who do not support the leftist politics controlling their states.
And Brad, you're a busy guy, and it sounds like Pacific Justice Institute has their hands filled. But I'm reading here that there's Idaho legislation that you're supporting, which would establish Traditional Family Values Month. There's only so many things you can fight for and take up the cause for. Why this? Why is this important, and why did Pacific Justice Institute decide to get behind it?
Yeah, well, first off, I want you to know we have a whole division dealing with state legislation, battling the bad bills, but also effectively promoting good bills like school choice in Florida. We were part of that. The 10 Commandments on the classrooms in Louisiana, we were behind that. And then in Texas, bringing chaplains into the public schools, as well as 6 states forbidding teenage boys to go into girls' locker rooms when the girls are there naked. We were having tremendous success. But in Idaho, it's a wonderful new piece of legislation we're backing that could spread to other states. It basically recognizes the traditional family from Mother's Day to Father's Day. So it's giving recognition and respect to that institution that not only has been dear to the prosperous development of this country, but also to the existence and reproduction of the human race. So we think, if the government is going to go out of its way so much, to promote deviant lifestyles that are divergent from the laws of nature and the benefits of the laws of nature, surely our country, at the very least, can remember to respect that institution from which our prosperity, our safe and stable societies and communities, and continuation even of our race and species, the humanity race of the humankind. There we go. So that's why we're promoting this very important bill that we think is going to move across the country, respecting traditional family.
Well, we love that you're fighting the good fight. I hope our audience, if they're not already familiar with PGI, they get familiar with it through this podcast. The website's right there behind you, pgi.org. So many
PJI.org.
PJI.org.
PJI.org, yes.
Yep. And so many resources, as you just mentioned, and so glad that you are a friend of this ministry and so grateful for the work that you're doing at Pacific Justice Institute. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you, and keep up the great work.
Thanks, Brad.
Awesome. And that's all the time we have today for the City of God podcast. If you enjoyed this episode with Brad Dacus, we pray that you would pass it along to a family member, a friend, somebody that's out there that wants to know more about how our faith applies to this cultural moment, particularly in this election season. This is an incredible resource to expose your friends and family members to. And we pray that you would come back right here, and we'll see you next time on the City of God. The City of God podcast is produced by Coral Ridge Ministries and made in partnership with the Institute for Faith and Culture. Visit us at cityofgodpodcast.com to access all of our previous episodes. You can also listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, or anywhere you get podcasts. A full video version of this podcast is available on YouTube. This is the City of God podcast, where Christ meets culture.